Welcome to Starkey Soundbites. I'm Dave Fabry, your host and Starkey's Chief Innovation Officer and an audiologist by training. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my good friend and colleague, Ray Woodworth, who's been with Starkey for
over 20 years.
20 years and in the discipline for over 20 years. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that you are known as a master of custom hearing aids. And I can tell you that you have many fans who are likely listening to Starkey Soundbites perhaps for the first time because of the way that you've helped them achieve the best solutions for their patients by ensuring customized, personalized technology. And that includes not only the programming that goes into compensate for their hearing loss, but importantly, that custom solution that enables the cosmetic benefits, all-day comfort, freedom from feedback, a nice tight fit in the ear. And there's no one better than I can think to talk about this topic than you, Ray. And I'm really pleased to have you join us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I have to give a lot of credit to Bill Austin.
Of course.
Yeah. I've been here at the headquarters for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, when I first came here, I didn't know what I was getting into. Working with Bill all these years, he's shown me a different light. I used to work in a private practice, and when I was in private practice back in 2000, I was doing custom products at the time. I would shoot impressions and look at the orders and make sure I get the best result for the patients. And that's what we want. We want to make sure our patients are happy and we give them the best results. And quite honestly, I would just shoot the impression, put it in the box, write up the order, and send it out. I wouldn't pay attention to the little details that I've learned through Bill. And
Bill is fond of saying the ear is the boss.
Yes.
And I know you've taken that mantle too in your day-to-day activities.
Yes.
Why is it that the ear is the boss?
So that's a very good question. So, in my classes, I always make that phrase, and I got it from Bill.
Yeah.
So one time I was shooting an impression, and I take it out and I show it to Bill. Yeah. And Bill looked at me and goes, "Remember, I'm not the boss."
I love it.
I said, "Okay." He goes, "You're not the boss." He said, "The ear's the boss."
Yeah.
And I was like, and it didn't really dawn on me until he really said it, and he looked at me in the eyes.
The magnitude of that statement kind of initially,
it resonated.
It totally resonates for anyone that has made custom devices that fitted properly and didn't fit properly.
So what we do is we hear a lot of patients tell us what they want, but we don't hear a lot about what they need.
Yeah.
And the ear dictates that.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure our patients are happy. We want to give them what they want. But at the end of the day, we can't change the ear for what it is.
Nope.
The ear is so unique and so different. So Bill always tells me, when you work with these patients, you want to do what's best for the patient, but you have to see the ear. The ear tells us a story. It tells us what we can and cannot do. And being here at the factory as long as I've been here, I know the parts, the receivers, the vents, the chip, and what the size of them and how they fit.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if we're going to get into discussion about over-the-counters, but
of course, yeah.
The ears are not standard.
Right.
So
people have talked about the uniqueness of the external ear, the ear canal.
Yeah.
It's almost like an ear print as unique as your fingerprint is.
Yeah. And, when you look at the different styles of hearing aids, with our 2.4 CICs, with our rechargeables, the AP molds.
AP, what's that mean?
AP means absolute power.
Okay.
So
I would beg to differ in terms of saying traditionally, historically, AP means absolute power, but I think now all purpose.
Yes.
I see more and more customization. When we're talking ear mold impressions and custom products, it's not just an in-the-ear custom product, but also a custom driver, a custom solution that goes in the ear coupled to a RIC, a receiver in the canal device, or even a BTE in the form of an ear mold.
Yeah, so yes, correct. So one of the things that people need to understand is we remember the Zone product that we had? It was a RIC with a bud.
Yep.
And we were trying to reach a certain loss that wasn't a candidate for a bud. They needed more power.
Yeah.
So back in 2009, 2010, we got a hollow shell and Bill put a receiver in it.
Yeah.
And then we solidified it. We made it hard. And people ask me, why is it a solid shell? So when you talk about absolute power, the receiver vibrates.
Yes.
And then when you put it in a solid shell, it makes it more stable.
Right.
And it separates the receiver from the microphone.
Correct.
So when you do these things, you can drive it harder, give more clarity without feedback. So the AC was born because we wanted to fit losses that needed the power and the clarity.
Yes.
And in 2009, when we started fitting them, like you said, they were called absolute power because all we were using was the 70 receiver and the big 60 receiver.
Yes.
Nowadays, we found that some buds don't stay in the ear. Some buds irritate people.
Yeah.
So we went into using APs for all different powers now to allow better sitting molds in the ear to help it retain. Also, some ears you can get really big vents.
Yep.
And again, the ear is the boss because some ears you can't get a big vent because the ear doesn't allow it.
Right.
So when we talk about AP molds, I find that you can pretty much fit anybody with an AP mold.
Yeah.
If you really look at it. But there's some cases where the ear is too small to where you can't get a true big open vent, but they may feel occluded.
Yeah, it's
So
that
you may have-
trade-off
yes.
between the power of the receiver and then the consequent size of
And then
that
the open-
receiver and the openness
Yes.
of the vent. And if you want
So-
a high-powered receiver with a big vent, which often might only be the case for those steeply sloping
Yeah,
losses.
and you have to be careful with that because if you make the vent too big, you're gonna have feedback issues.
Exactly.
So, but I've seen that I've seen people come in with buds and we're not reaching the highs because it's too open. It's not when you make a custom mold, it conceals it better. It makes it sound better. So
And you can likely get a more secure and deeper fitting in the canal. That the receiver can sit deeper in the
and
canal
better sound direction.
with better sound direction, so
Absolutely.
that it's not pointing it into a canal wall.
Yep.
It's getting further in the canal wall, so that even if you're doing a more open device, there's a smaller residual canal
Yes.
beyond the tip of the receiver than what you likely can get with a dome placement and that more
Absolutely.
standard location, a little shallower in the canal.
And also you get less feedback.
Yeah.
Because you got a good seal fit.
Right. And separating the microphone from the receiver.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that were configured for a reason. And I think and I'll be honest with you, there's people that don't want behind the ear. There's people that want custom.
Yeah.
They don't want something behind their ear.
Right.
So I've seen people come in and they say they want an IIC, which is invisible in the canal. Yeah. And they don't want the Bluetooth. They don't want to stream. They just want it cosmetic. We're known for cosmetic. We're known to make really small hearing aids.
Yep.
So if the ear dictates, says, hey, we can do this, I get excited for the patient. Hey, we can build this for you. Ear tells us we can. So every time I go in, when we see patients, 9 out of 10 times I shoot their ear impression because I can show them
Right.
and say, look, this is what we have. This is what we have to work with. I can make this what you want, what you told me. So
yeah, and one of the things that I've seen both you and Bill Austin do is really look in the ear with the otoscope and then encourage the patient to talk before you make the impression. Before you ever make the impression, you're looking in the ear, because we're not talking about imaging the inside of a coffee cup or a bottle, a stable. That thing is moving.
Absolutely.
And I've watched both you and Bill look in the ear and really analyze before an impression is ever made or an otoblock is even positioned to see what's going on and where that movement, how much movement does the
Absolutely.
patient
I'm glad you brought that up. So people always ask me, hey, Ray, I work with a lot of our customers over the phone and I troubleshoot a lot and I work with a lot of difficult cases. And I get people calling me saying, Ray, why is one staying in just fine and the other one is walking out?
Yeah.
Well, each ear is different.
Yeah.
And so I've seen where one ear moves a lot when they chew and then the other ear doesn't move at all.
Well, and I'll go a little further with that because I've done some work in the past in this area. And I think whether or not people realize it, and this is going to drive some people crazy now when they think about this, but we are, as humans, we're habitual chewers. And so when you go to chew on a steak or a jawbreaker or anything that is a hard, resistive object, unconsciously, most people favor one side or the other, whether they have dental work or a cap or a crown or sensitivity, and they're bearing down when they go to chew on something really meaty, they go to the same side all the time.
Yep.
And that is what drives, most of the time, people will not have a patient who has IICs or completely in the canal devices that walk out of both sides. It's usually, it walks out of one side, and then when you ask them to start thinking about where are they chewing more aggressively, it's almost always on the same side, and that's going to be the side that walks out.
And you know what?
More than the other, and you need to take care.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that then? How do you compensate for that?
That's a good question. So, when it comes to TMJ, jaw movements, people think that just because you make it longer, or they think there's certain ways you can do to avoid that area. You have to keep in mind that when you have a profound loss, unless you have that jaw movement, you have to make sure you have a good seal.
Yes.
You can't just start modifying it and trying to take off in that area.
Because feedback will be the result.
Yep. And when they chew, it starts feeding back.
Yep.
But if an ear has good retention, and if it's a mild hearing loss, you can be a little more aggressive.
Right.
You can start taking off more.
Yep.
So it's not just the ear, but also the hearing loss we have to look at.
Correct.
So more profound losses, I found that you have to have a good seal fit. And you can take off in certain areas, but don't be too aggressive on that area, especially where the jaw movement is. A lot of people ask me where the jaw movement is typically on the anterior wall before the second bend.
Correct.
That's where it usually is. It's not on the back wall. It's not on top. It's
can
right,
be, but it's far more common on the anterior.
far more common in the front wall before the second bend.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier about why we always look in the ear.
Yeah.
Another thing we look at is the texture.
Yes.
The texture of the ear.
Yes.
I've seen patients where the skin folds. The skin's very loose.
Yes.
And, we work with a lot of elderly people.
Yeah.
And when the skin folds and it's very loose, you got to be careful because
you can get what's called prolapsing canals, where the canal
that's where you get
is
sores.
it closes down because that cartilaginous portion is loose and floppy.
And if you make the hearing aid too tight, what happens? The skin goes with it, and then the skin pulls it out again. So you have this motion of why is it walking out? And sometimes because we're not tapering it enough, or it's too tight.
Yeah.
So when I see an ear that has a lot of folds in it, I typically try to not make it too tight, especially if it's a mild hearing loss.
Okay.
I try not to make it too tight and take off on and taper it, so it will be easier to get in and it won't just push it out. If you have a profound loss and you're worried about it taking off too much, that's where the canal locks come in.
Right.
That's where you do a half shell, a full shell. We can do any style.
Right.
But the question is, what's the best style? What's the best solution? So everybody has a solution. But my question is, learning from Bill, is it's not the solution, what's the best solution?
Right.
And the best solution comes down to how much do you understand the ear and understand the product.
Right.
If you understand the product and the ear and the hearing loss, you can marry them and interface it better.
Yeah.
So
from the professional standpoint, for many of the people listening to this podcast are dispensers, audiologists. The most important thing is garbage in, garbage out. And so they've got to start with a good, deep impression. And I would encourage professionals to make deep impressions on everyone, whether it's a mild gain or a more significant gain, because it helps with how to direct that sound down the ear canal to know and anticipate any turns.
Not only that, but also for retention. Yeah. I've seen so many impressions come in where they're too short. Yeah. And
then you're just guessing. We're guessing at the factory level.
Yeah, and also I cringe because they call us in, why is my hearing aid walking out? Why is it feeding back? It's because the impression was too short. Yeah. So what happens is you lose the bulbous areas of the ear. One of the things I learned working with Bill all these years is paying attention to the little things. Yeah. The little things can make the biggest impact. So when you shoot an impression, pay attention. Yeah. People tell me, Ray, how do you put it down so far? And I'll be quite honest with you. And there's people that would admit it, that some people just don't feel comfortable going down to the ear.
But part of that is if you get into the habit, if you routinely go instruct the patient what you're going to be doing, tell them they might feel a little, discomfort as you're placing it, but assuring them that you're not doing any damage. If you get used to doing the same procedure on all of the time, on every patient, even knowing that the architecture is different, it's going to lessen that anxiety. And I think because of those dome tips with the receiver in the canals becoming the most popular style, quite frankly, as a discipline, we've gotten out of the habit of making good impressions, Dave, good first impressions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, one of the things I bring up in my classes is, when you get the technique and understand how to place the block and so forth, you have to remember, if you use a big block on a small ear, it's not comfortable.
No.
And they react.
Sizing it
the size
properly.
of the block is a huge factor. You know, Bill always tells me to flatten the cotton. And I was like, why is he always telling me to flatten the cotton? And it made me realize that when you flatten that cotton, you can go down further without putting pressure on the other side.
So you prefer cotton over foam?
Absolutely.
Me too.
I think you can use foam if it's for the right ear. If you have a surgical ear, absolutely. Fill up the cavity. Get the cavity filled in. But when it comes to IICs or CICs, something that needs a lot of information about that ear, I would go with cotton because you can flatten it and make it more comfortable. Yes. Also, it gives us more information. When the block is too big, we lose almost half of the ear canal because you use the foam that was huge. Yeah. And
people don't realize that as soon as they come to us, the first thing the technician is doing is they take that off, and if it's half filled the canal, there's a lot of guesswork.
Yes.
So that's where I think cotton is customizable. You flatten it, you put it in, and this is ultimately then really the ultimate in blocking, otoblocking, and tackling the problem unique to the patient.
And I ask people in the class, why do you guys continue to use foam? And you know what they tell me?
What?
They're worried about getting a blow-by.
Okay. So they're
okay, fair enough.
Sure.
Fair enough. You know, that's fair to say. Yeah. But if you get the right circumference, I've been shooting, one time, Dave, I shot over 100 ear impressions in one day.
Wow.
Because we had classes that come in for training. Yeah. And I had to get, you know, Bill wants those impressions perfect.
Yeah. 100 perfect impressions in a day is no small feat.
Yeah, and Bill is a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And he wants to make sure everything is right where he wants it to make sure to get the best result. So I was till 3 a.m. You know, you've seen it.
I've seen it.
And never had a blow-by.
Yeah.
Never got.
That's because it becomes ritual when you're doing it over and over, the same process all the time.
Yep. And I use a videotoscope.
Yep.
I don't use a hand.
Good light is extremely important.
Yep.
What about there's been a time for those of us who've been around a while where people did impressions with a closed jaw and an open jaw using a bite block. Yeah. What's your position on that?
That's a good question. I get that question often.
Yeah.
So 22 years ago when I started, I saw a lot of the mouth blocks. Mm-hmm. And back then, one of the reasons why we used mouth blocks is because we wanted to get a nice seal fit. Mm-hmm. Well, our feedback cancel is phenomenal.
Much
so
improved.
Our tight fits didn't have to be like it used to.
Yeah.
So people use mouth block because they wanted to make sure they get a nice, good fit.
Yeah.
I mean, tight fit. Well, I'll be quite honest with you, I never use a mouth block. Yeah. I use relaxed jaw. Mm-hmm. I don't, and if they have...
And a stable jaw position, though, is important. Yeah. Not having them talk because the cure rate on these physical impressions, silicone or, methylmethacrylate impressions require that, that cure rate is going to start sealing. And if you're having them talk, you don't control for the fit at any position.
And that's one of the reasons why we look in the ear before we shoot it to see because there's some people that don't have TMJ issues.
Right.
And there's some that are aggressive. But again, we don't use mouth blocks. I used to, but not anymore.
Okay. So deep impression, cotton otoblock.
Yeah.
Fixed, relaxed jaw position, but a stable jaw position.
And also, there's another thing that's very important. Mm-hmm. While you're shooting the impression, keep the tip inside the ear. I think we pull out too soon.
Okay.
The tip. So
to get a solid fill.
Yeah. So what happens is when you put the block in and you got your material ready, the gun, whatever, or the syringe, when you put the tip inside the opening of the aperture. Mm-hmm. I find that people, they move it out too quickly and you start getting these voids in air pockets.
In layers.
Yeah, layers and stuff. And it creates voids where we have to fill it in here and start guessing.
Yep.
And now you have a fit issue.
Right.
So I think what you should do is, and I do this all the time, is I stick the tip in and I count 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. I say it in my head. Mm-hmm. And then when I start seeing the material, I start coming out with it.
Okay.
And then... And keep in mind, I've tried to perfect it because Bill wants it perfect.
Yeah.
And I got to make sure I give it to him perfect. So I've learned to perfect it to where now when I pull the tip out, I let it run out, and then I go up into the helix, right? I come back down, and then I keep it there, and I let the material do its own work. Yeah. I don't try to do it for it. So what happens is, people when they shoot the impression, when they take it out, they start moving it too much.
Yeah.
And what happens is you start creating these air pockets. And so I let the impression do what it's supposed to do.
Don't be in a hurry.
Don't be in a hurry. And when you put it, and when you go up and go back down into the bowl, leave it there and let the silicone do what it's supposed to do, which is it will spread out. And it's all you have to do. And then when you take it off, you should have a nice spiral.
Yep.
And round flat. To think about that, when people talk about, hey, why would you shoot a full ear impression or a long impression all the time? Well, you got to keep in mind that when you scan an ear impression, let's say you decide to change the model. Let's say you decide to add a canal lock or a helix lock or whatever. We'll have it on file. If you don't fill all that in, you're going to have to ask for a new impression.
Right.
So if you give us everything at first, we can always add things to it.
Do the same process all the time, and don't be in a rush. Make it happen. Good lighting, like you said.
Yes.
And then and then focus on trying to make it as complete an impression, and don't worry about wasting a little bit of material.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better to get that
Dave,
entire
so
ear.
if they call back and say, "Hey, can you add a canal lock?" Well, you didn't fill in the bowl.
Right. So I can't.
We
Got a
can't.
new impression.
We need a new impression.
Takes time.
Yeah.
Another impression. It's interesting because we live in a TikTok world these days, and I know there have been hundreds of thousands of views of people getting wax removed from their ears.
Yeah.
I think you should start a TikTok channel on making ear mold impressions.
Yeah.
Because it is, putting my nerd hat on. I mean, it is an art and a science to get a quality impression, which is absolutely going to deliver that end result, whether it's for an ear mold, a receiver in the canal, AP, or whether it's a custom device that fits deeply in the ear.
Yeah.
And it all starts with the impression. And if you're not beginning from a good analysis, spend a little bit of time with a good light looking in that ear, getting a lay of the land before you ever put the block in, before you ever put any material in the ear, you're going to be so much better off than if you try to rush through it because you're scared.
Yeah, and quite honestly, Dave, I think, like you said, you hit it on the head. Slow down.
Slow down.
Because if you take your time and get it right, you have less returns.
Yep.
You'll have less fit issues, less remakes, if we just get it right on the first.
So I want to talk about two areas. One is, let's do custom first, and then I want to get to the issue of the trade-off between venting, and let's cover this, venting and receiver power.
Yeah.
Many professionals think worst case scenario, well, what happens if the person's hearing changes? So I'm going to go with a bigger vent, a bigger receiver, larger power receiver than I need right now, but I want to have a little bit in reserve. But then that means you're having to downsize the vent, particularly on smaller ears. We can make other receivers, other APs. What's your feeling on an oversizing the power of the receiver and undersizing the vent versus the other way around? Selecting the appropriate power and then going with the biggest vent.
You brought up something that I run into a lot as far as people wanting to overpower or reserve gain. Yeah. Like you mentioned. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't think about that until you brought it up. I get a lot of calls about, why is the hearing aid bigger? Why is the vent too small? Why, they give me all these whys. And I found that you have to do the initial fit and make it the most successful fit. Right. You can't think about the reserve because
or what's going to happen in the future.
Yes, and the reason why is because you want to make sure that patient's happy when you first fit them.
Yeah.
When you start thinking about reserve or the future of, well, I need this for later on, you're going to change that fit. You're going to make the hearing aid bigger because the receiver sizes are not all the same.
No.
They're all different.
No.
So when you ask for more power, you may be asking for a bigger hearing aid.
Right.
So if cosmetic is more important, I would fit what they need now and make sure they're happy.
We can remake with a larger receiver, whether it's a custom or an AP.
But Dave, let's say the hearing changes. Okay, then we got to go back to the drawing board and make something that suits that change.
At that time.
Yeah. So I found that people, when they start asking for things that they don't need now, but they may need later on, but they may not. But what happens is you start having occlusion issues.
Right.
You start having vents being too small because you want a bigger receiver.
Right. So it's really a partnership between us, the manufacturer, and the professional. And The professional knows the patient, they know their business, but we also know that trade-off because of our experience with millions of years.
And also the parts, we're familiar with the parts and how they fit.
And so you know, and I think it's really, truly, the best results are achieved when there is a meaningful and deep collaboration between the partner, the professional, and the manufacturer, and the trust that it goes along with that. And I know you are really a trusted advisor to a lot of professionals in the field, because they know that you're thinking, as they are, in the best interest of the patient. And it's not just because we want to sell more products of this size or whatever.
No, I want to do what's best for the patient like they do. Yeah. You know, we're in this to make sure the patients are happy.
Right.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because, you know, I truly believe that if you get the initial fit right, you're going to have a long-lasting relationship with your patient.
Yeah. And whether it's custom or whether it's AP, I cannot stress the importance too of that custom solution to direct the path of the sound down the ear canal so that it's not bouncing and careening down the cartilaginous and bony portion of the canal, but giving us direct a path to the eardrum as possible, makes a subtle but important difference on sound quality.
And you know, when you say that, you know what comes to my mind? Standard over-the-counter hearing aids.
Right. You know, and think about that.
I've seen people come in with buds and it's hitting right into the wall.
Right.
And they're like, I can hear you, but it doesn't sound clear. It sounds muffled. You know,
and we think about, you know, we say, well, the programming is wrong for their hearing loss, but
it's the position of that
the
bud.
Position of the bud, the way the sound is directed, all of that goes into the sound quality and probably is equally, if not more important.
And sometimes if you have a really big ear and you put a bud in, all the sound bleeds out, and they need more power in the highs, and you can't get it because it's all bleeding out and it starts feeding back, and you run into the situation where they need a custom. So, you know, this over the counter, you know, I tell you, I see, you know, the commercials, and I see social media, and I see these over the counter stuff, and it makes me cringe because I know how
it may be an important part. We have to embrace the new reality and providing accessibility and affordability.
I agree.
However,
I agree with you. I do agree. However, assessment affordable, I think that's great, but if people have seen as many years as I've seen, our ears are not standard. They're uniquely different. And I tell you right now, there's going to be a lot of hearing aids in the drawer. It's going to increase. And the reason why is because people don't realize that, Ray, I feel muffled.
Yeah.
And not only because of the sound direction, because the ear is so small and you put a bud in, they feel plugged up. They feel occluded. So nobody's going to want to walk around feeling plugged up or occluded. Or when I take it out, I'm going to hear better. So there's things that happen with the standard bud. Even if you change the tip, some ears just don't work with it, no matter what size tip you use.
Yeah, beyond comfort, it's that sound delivery. Absolutely.
You have 90-degrgy turn ears.
Exostoses.
You have exostosis. You have
mastoid cavities.
Yes, and you have conductive components where they need a lot of power. I mean, there's going to be people going out there that have, and you know as well as I do, that these are made for mild to moderate hearing losses. There's going to be people out there that have moderate to severe. They're going to try it.
They're going to try it
because they
think, oh, this is, now I can get hearing aids less expensively.
Yeah,
I don't have to bother a professional.
And then they don't know the difference of how much better it could be.
Yeah.
And so, I have mixed feelings about it, but I think you're right. It's more accessible and more affordable. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's what's best for the patient.
Absolutely. And, you know, so I mentioned exostoses and mastoid cavities. What's the most difficult type of patient or canal or ears that you've worked with?
Well, there was a guy that came in several years ago. He had Treacher's Collins. And he came up to me and he goes, you know, I need a new hearing aid. He's wearing a hearing aid. He took off both of his ears and he gave it to me.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
First time that happens, that'll shock you a little bit.
First time. Yeah. And he used 3M tape.
Yeah.
To tape him to his head.
Tape him on. Yeah. Now they have magnets. Yeah, they have magnets. Really sophisticated prosthetic ears.
Yeah, the ears will look so real now. So unreal. Yeah. And so the challenge we had was feedback.
Yeah.
Because
narrow canals.
Yeah, narrow canal, and also when you tape an ear to the head, the ear to the head has to be completely sealed.
Yeah, it's not sealed. It's not tight.
Yeah, and the sound comes through the side of the ear, and so we told him that he needed a more strong a stronger tape, more adhesive tape. And when he did that, the feedback went away. But it was a tricky one because you have to shoot the prosthetic ear on the head. You can't shoot the ear and then fit it. I've seen that happen where people send me orders with a picture of an ear. And I said, well, you have to have the ear on the head,
right?
Because that's how it's going to fit,
right?
And so that was a tricky one. And I want to bring up something about challenging fits that I ran into, and I've seen fittings across all 50 states that come see us. Especially the ones where the customer said, "Hey, we tried everything and we're not getting any good results." I had a lady that came in, and I'll never forget this. And it wasn't a physical fit issue. It was more about word recognition, being able to understand speech. And we Justine, the audiologist, did a test, and we shot the ear impressions, and I told the lady, I said, listen, your hearing loss, and she knew she had a bad hearing loss, and she had zero word recognition, zero, and she wanted to be able to talk on the phone, and so I was concerned because, sometimes you have to set expectations, so you have to tell the patient, hey, this is the test, this is the result. And so we did the test, and again, and when we fit her, she said she could hear better. Hearing wasn't the problem, it was understanding.
Yes.
So we fit her with new hearing aids, and we got it up, to where she liked it, verification, aided response. And she goes, do you mind if I go to the other room and talk to you? I said, just letting you know, you're a great lip reader, because I'm a lip reader as well, because I have a hearing loss too.
Yep.
I said, you're a great lip reader. You really tune in, and you've had a hearing loss for a very long time, and you've learned to, look at people and read lips. And she goes, absolutely. But she goes, can I try to call you? And I said, yeah, sure.
I'm wondering what she's going to hear. Yeah.
So she goes into another room and closes the door, right? And I told her that we have a glass in our offices. And I told her to turn around, not to look at me.
Yeah.
I pick up the phone, and I asked her 5 simple questions. And she understood none of them. I wasn't surprised.
Sure.
I gave the phone to her son. She got all the questions right.
What?
I believe, and we truly don't understand, we understand the ear and how the ear works. But the perception of how we hear.
Yeah.
She's known her son for 25 years. He was 25 at the time. She knew that voice.
Okay, so her son was talking. It wasn't, okay, gotcha. So a familiar talker.
The son was with me.
Got it. Okay.
I got the phone and gave it to the son.
Gotcha, okay.
And I couldn't believe.
The familiar talker, and she was able to hone in on his voice.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen that many times, and it's absolutely
and the
true.
word screen was 0% in both ears.
Yeah.
And you know what? She was ecstatic.
Yeah.
And she said,
because that's a voice she needs to hear every day.
Yeah, so I tell people, just because what you see,
right,
you got to try it,
right,
because you don't know until you try it. So she came back to me, and she was in tears. She goes, I could hear my son. I could understand him. Right. And she looked
Which for her is the most important voice in the world.
She didn't care about me. She was like, whatever.
I need to hear you for this example.
But it meant so much to her, to her son. And so it made me realize, and Bill always tells me this, when you fit people, and we talk about real ear measurements and verifications and hearing and noise tests and all that. I think it's all important, very important. But the truth is, when the patient actually wears it, and what they experience personally, because we don't know how the brain is really perceiving it. We know how to measure the resonance of the ear canal. We know how to
matching target.
Yeah, we know
all of that is important.
Yes.
And an important part of the science.
Absolutely.
But the art and the emotion of this is, like you said, the ear is the boss, and the patient is the boss, and the needs of the patient are is always the only consideration that matters. And that relentless focus is what makes you not only a master ear technician, an ear magician in the sense of understanding the patient's needs.
And I've been very fortunate because I've seen it for many years, and I think the truth is what the patient tells us. Yeah. If I have people that I can go on and on, Dave.
Well, and we're out of time, but
we are.
I would love to.
But just real quick, I see people that come in and like you said, we target the fit and everything looks great. We do all these measurements, and they're like, Ray, it's not loud enough. Yeah. I can barely hear you, and everything looks good on the graphs and the computer, and I keep turning it up, right? Well, the guy wore analog hearing aids for
Right.
30 years.
Power junkies.
He's a power junkie.
Yeah.
So, but we don't see it on the audiogram.
People listen in different points.
And Bill
in
says
their,
it best. We fit super thresholds. We don't fit
Absolutely.
thresholds.
We do not fit
We
thresholds.
fit super thresholds.
Yeah, and people like to listen at various points in that
Yes.
level. That's why comfortable loudness and upper limit of comfortable loudness,
Yeah.
I know, factors in a lot to the fittings. And I think it's all part of that personalization,
Yes.
customization, and listening to the patient. And I'm really appreciative of you coming on the podcast
I have more to say, but that's okay.
nerd out a little bit on the physical factors, the emotional factors, and most importantly, the patient components. You had one more story to share, so go for it.
So I don't know which one you want me to share, but I'll share a story. Yeah. So I had I've seen as many patients I've seen over the years. One of the things we do here at the headquarters is we interface the fit before we build the hearing aid. What I mean by that is we actually make the shell and we put it in the patient's ears. And you'd be surprised what you can learn about how the shell fits before we actually build the product.
Right. So this goes back to the earlier part of the discussion where the movement in the ear canal, and before you ever put the components in the product,
Yes.
you're just taking the shell. And this is the benefit of being here
At the
at
factory.
the headquarters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've watched Bill do this and you do this, where you put it in the ear before the components are there and see how that shell moves.
Yeah.
And then it helps you with additional modification before you put the components in. And it's one of the
honestly,
things that makes that truly the Center for Excellence.
Yes, and the Center for Excellence is a very special place because we have the factory behind us, and we have Bill Austin.
I've been really spoiled for the 12 years I've been working here to have them right down the hall.
Yeah.
And I know that the professionals out there in the market don't have that ability to be able to walk down the hall and get the benefit of this. But you as a resource, the Center for Excellence, Bill Austin, and that expertise is what I think enables Starkey to continue to have a reputation, the earned reputation of making the smallest, most comfortable, most cosmetically appealing devices, whether they're AP molds, whether they're custom in the ear canal devices of anyone in the industry. And that still, the combination of our technology, the role of the professional will deliver optimal results for the patient. And,
Can I bring up one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah. Go. You mentioned about the professional.
Yeah.
When we talk about getting products, over the counter and so forth, you know how many people I see that come in that don't know that they're completely plugged with wax before they get a hearing test. We're going to have people out there testing themselves.
Yeah.
They're going to be completely plugged with wax. Yeah. I've had people come in with perforated eardrums, excessive fluid behind the eardrum, not even aware of it.
Right.
That part right there is so vital and so important that I think the health of the patient, I think, is the main thing here that we're talking about here, that what's best for the patient. And there was a time where this guy came in and he had a growth in his ear, didn't know about it. And we told Bill about it. And he ended up having a tumor. And he went to a doctor, an ENT, and he had to have surgery that day. Yeah. It was so bad, the tumor. And pretty much he told us it saved his life.
Yeah.
When I see these things, it bothers me because I really care about what we do for our patients. When I see that and see what I've seen all these years, and I see these commercials and I see these things on social media, are we truly doing what's best for the patient?
Well, I think, it is part of a longer discussion, but I mean, raising awareness for the importance of hearing, raising awareness for the role of the professional is all a part of this process. And I think, we'll see how this all goes. But I think if more people understand the benefits of amplification and the role of the professional and the importance of technology, the better off we'll all be.
But don't you think that we should look in the ear before we do anything?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And do you think that people are going to get that service? And
not, they have various questions that are going to be given
Yeah,
to them
interesting.
to sort that out. But,
Yeah.
I think that issue of OTC is going to continue to be an evolving one.
And I think
And we just need to see how.
I think if you get an OTC, at least go see a professional.
Yeah.
And let
I'm
them,
with you.
and let them decide what's best.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, so vital.
Completely agree. So, okay, we've gone over, but lots of great stuff here.
Okay.
And I'll ask one more question. What's your favorite sound? You mentioned you have a hearing loss. What's the one sound that you would really miss if you could no longer hear the way you hear?
When you said that touched my heart. And I'll tell you why. I have a 19-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Loves to text.
Mm-hmm.
Just to hear her voice.
Yeah. Texting is one thing, but
she's a freshman in college.
Yeah.
And she's in
South
a sorority.
Carolina.
Yeah, she's having too much fun, but
Yeah.
she's in a sorority. And I said, honey, don't text me, call me.
Mm-hmm.
So if I didn't hear my daughter's voice, that would
Right.
bother me a lot.
Enough said.
So that's personal to me.
We'll end there. So thank you, Ray,
You're
for
welcome.
being with us on this issue of
well, thanks for
Soundbites.
having
We
me.
talked about a
Absolutely.
wide array of topics, and love to have you back to continue this discussion.
Please do. I would love to come back.
If you like this session, please share it with your friends. Subscribe to the podcast so you're sure not to miss a single episode. Consult with Ray Woodworth, who's in the Center for Excellence, and the rest of the team that we have here. We're your partner. We want to help
Absolutely.
ensure that those fittings deliver optimal results so that your patients are beyond satisfied to delighted. And thank you for listening, and we'll look forward to hearing you on the next time.